All right, everyone. So we're kind of, talking about certain functions within Unity and using C# to accomplish some of those goals. So this is scene 9. Okay. So if you go to the folder, you can open up level 1. And what I want to talk about is the idea of moving between scenes. So I have scene 1, and I also have, or sorry, level 1, and I also have level 2. All right, so we have here I have level 1 and then level 2. I'm actually gonna, why don't we, there's level 1, this is level 2. Okay. What I want to do is I want to set it up that if I'm gonna go back to level 1 here. If I collect 3 or more diamonds, you go to the next level. Okay. Now, how do we do this? Well, what I need to do is we need to set up our build. The build, which will come up in a later video today, is which of the scenes that I have am I outputting? Okay. This might be outputting to an APK or an Android file. That's what you guys are going to do in this class. You might be outputting it to a desktop application or something like that, or a web file like we did, at least for my class. We did that in 427. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to edit and we're going to go to, I believe, where do we go? Sorry, it's different under the new version. Build profile. All right. And what I'm going to do is for now, I'm just going to keep it as Mac OS X. This is where you're deciding which format you're exporting as. We'll talk about that in a later video. But the thing I'm more interested here is this thing called scene list. And what I'm going to do is add these levels to my scene. And I'm just going to literally drag and drop these in. So I added scene 1, and I'm going to add scene 2. See, I got that little green plus. And just for, even though it's not technically here, I'm just going to delete that. Okay. So this is my level 1. This is my level 2. The way it works is that the first, when it builds your scenes, it starts top down. So it should start in level 1, and then it's going to go to level 2 as like sort of the quote next level. Okay. It also has these numbers over here. Those of you who, remember if you covered this, then you guys did programming in 327 and 427. This is an array. Okay. I don't want to get too deep into programming here, but you know, remember an array is something like let x equals, or I don't know, let numbers equal 0, 5, 100, I don't know, 5,000. Okay. So it's a variable. An array is a variable called whatever you want to call it. I'll just call it my numbers, just so it doesn't seem like a term. And then it can have a list of values, right? And so like this is we call this an index number. Index number, this is the first index, second index, third index. These are the 4 values of my array. And if you remember anything about arrays, they always start at 0. So your first slot, so to speak, is array 0, and then array 1, and then array 2, and then array 3, and then so on and so on. So that's actually what's happening here, where my first level is actually, this is an array, and index 0 is my first scene, and then so on and so on. It's like scene index 1, index 2, index 3. Okay. So I have that set up. Okay. Now that's not going to be enough to get what I need to do. So I'm actually going to click on this. And there should already be a script on this. And I'm going to go to my scripts panel. And it is called player move scene. Okay. And there's a couple things I want to point out here. Now, if you guys, we've talked about making a C# file, right? But the thing is like, we have to add to this a little bit. And if you're wondering what using means, the way it kind of works is you guys, if you've ever built, students who did P5 with me, we would build documents or P5 documents using HTML. And the way it would work is you would go out and get the actual P5 library, okay? You can either connect to the file itself, or you can do what's called a content delivery network or a CDN and connect to it by doing something like this. And then you can even connect an additional library. So here, this is the regular P5 library. This is the P5 additional or add-on library that deals with sound, like, you know, the ability to play back sound and functions related to sound. And that's what allows me to do this. And then this is my own code. Well, that's kind of what's happening here. Each one of these, when it says using, what they're really doing is bringing in a library of C# code that's already been written, okay? So, you know, there's C# code related to the engine and that sort of thing. Now, we want to bring in some additional C# code that isn't usually by default, and that's called scene management. So if you're going to do this thing where you move between scenes, you're going to need to add this to the top of your document. So it says Unity Engine.scene management, and that's going to bring in some built-in functions about scene management in Unity, okay? Now, what's going on in this particular code is I have a variable called diamonds, okay? And then we have an event. We've talked about this in previous videos. So it's like, okay, if I touch another item, the first thing I'm doing is I'm checking to see whether that item is a diamond, okay? If that item is a diamond, I'm going to take the variable diamond, which defaults to 0, and I'm going to take whatever the value is and add 1 to it. Okay, so if it's 0, it's 1. If it's 1, it's 2. You know, if it's 2, it's 3, so on and so on. Okay. Then I'm actually going to destroy or remove that item from the game. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to say, well, what happens if we, you know, in my earlier thing, I said, okay, if we get to 3 or more diamonds, go to the next level, right? So how would we do that? Well, what I'm going to do is add yet another if statement here. If, so, you know, if evaluate something, what am I evaluating? Well, I'm evaluating, do I have 3 or more diamonds? If diamonds is less, or sorry, greater than or equal to 3, what do I want to happen? Well, what I want to happen is I want us to go to the next level. Okay, how do I do that? Well, there's a function called scene manager dots, or there's a, okay, let me say this again. There is an object called a scene manager, which has a function built into it called load scene. Okay, now what you can do here is you can say the literal name of the level. So in this case, let's go back to Unity. If I hit 3 diamonds, I want to go from level 1 to level 2. So I can literally type in level 2 here. Okay, it's a strings, which go in quotation marks. Now, if I go back, this should work. Okay, let me try this out. Okay, so I'm gonna hit play. Actually, let me double check. I don't think I added no, they are diamonds. Okay, good. They have to have the game tag diamond, otherwise that would not have worked. But it should work now. Oops. I forget something. I think I might have forgotten. Yeah, I didn't put a trigger on these. Let me do that real quick. By the time you guys get this, it should be fixed. So I forgot to do this when I set up these files. All right, let's try that. So it has game triggers now, so it should work. My ball should be able to collide with them, trigger the code, which should cause them to disappear. 1, 2. Notice how they're also being deleted from my game board. And then boom. And then we go to the next level. Okay. So it did work. Another way to do this is rather than saying the literal name of the level, you can also put the build index. So the build index is under build profiles. That's this thing that we just talked about under scene list. Okay. So for instance, rather than putting in level 2, I could just say index. I could put the index number, which would just be 1. So I'm just going to put in 1. All right, let's go back. And it should still work. Second. One, 2, 3. Boom. Okay. So that's great if I want to go to a specific level, but I also might, what if I wanted to have like multiple levels? So I'm just going to duplicate this level. Probably can't do a lot literally inside of it, but so I'm going to take this, I'm going to call this level 3. All right. I'm going to give these different colored diamonds just so it's easy to tell the difference between them. So I'll make these black diamonds. And I could change them. I could change around the settings. I'm too lazy for that. I also need to add this level to the build profile. So I need to go back and I'm going to add this new level to my build settings as such. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to my code. So at the moment, I'm telling it a specific either level name or a build index. But what if I wanted to be able to update that? So what if I wanted to say, okay, I want to start at build index 0, and then every time we run this, it just goes to the next build index. So what I'm going to do is build a variable. I'm going to call it build index equals 0. And then rather than loading a specific name or a specific a number, like the number of the build index, I'm just going to say build index. And this represents whatever this is. So, it's if I set this at 0, that's going to, send that back to 0, which would actually be the same level we're on. But what I could do is maybe we do something like this. Build index equals build index plus 1. Okay, so it's going to start at 0, go to 1. It's going to load that in. Okay. Now, this actually is going to cause a slight problem, which is that, well, if my diamonds are already at 3, and if it is 3 or more, it's going to go to the next build index. It would go from 0 to 1, but then when it gets to 1, since diamonds are already 3 or more, it's going to go to 2, and then, like the same problem. So I actually need to reset the number of diamonds I have from 3 back to 0, and I can do that just by reassigning the value. So I'm going to want to make sure that I do this. Otherwise, what would happen is it would just keep going up the next level. So diamonds equals 0. So if I've done my code correctly, it should work. All right. 1, 2, 3 resets back to 0 for diamonds. Oops. I think They're not provisions. Oh, these don't have the diamond on it. I have to have the game tags on it because otherwise it doesn't. It has to both. It has to both collide and have a game tag of diamond for the if statement to work. Let me just double check level 3 before I do anything. Yes, those are diamonds. Okay, let's try that again. This time I believe it should work. Ooh, wow. Let me try it again. Should have put a little fence up around my walls so I can't accidentally leave the playing field. 1, 2, 3. Diamonds go back to 0. Ah, what happened? Do that correctly? Okay. Sorry, I apologize. I got a couple things wrong there. I shouldn't have made a variable there. The reason why is that because this code is repeated in multiple scenes, it was essentially resetting the build index every scene back to 0. So I've actually come up with a better way to do it. Rather than using a variable to represent the build index, there's actually a piece of code you can do that would give you the current build index, which is this scene manager dot get active scene dot build index. So what that would do is when it runs, it gets the current build index, let's say 0 or 1. And then what this is doing is saying, well, whatever the current build index, add 1 to it, and then load that scene. And so this is a way of doing that, kind of what I was trying to get at, although my procedure there was a little bit off, although the spirit was kind of in the right place, where you have a build index and you're adding 1 to it. Okay. So if I go back and I'm going to try loading. So 1, 2, 3. My diamonds have been reset back to 0. 1, 2, 3, and then it goes to the last one. Okay, so this is how we can kind of use scene management to basically create separate levels. Now, in this case, I was using them like it's the same level, but how you might want to use this is like, well, let's say you're in a VR space, maybe you're in a forest, and maybe you want to set it up that if someone touches something, it takes them to a different scene where they're inside of a castle or inside of a cabin or something like that. We could do something like this where it's like you could basically tell them to switch between various scenes while the game or the VR world is running. So this is why that might be useful. Okay. In the next video, I'm going to talk about user interface.